hope you will understand this presentation, because it's quite hard even for the people that work with plants, gardens and things like that, to really take it into the brains and understand what we are doing in Stockholm, because it's quite new way of looking at soil, or what you material to use to produce the soil as we make it in Stockholm. I'm working as a tree officer, so I've been responsible for the trees standing in hard surfaces, and really the most complicated urban environments for plants and trees. And I've done that for more than 40 years now, and all along I've been looking for soils that really could work well for a long time, and just not the first 2-3 years and then collapse. So that has been a long search for me, and when I started at the traffic department, I got much more power to start to investigate and try to really find a way to save the urban trees in Stockholm, because it showed that there were about 1/3 of the trees were dying in Stockholm. So I really tried to find a way to save them. And it all started with a trip down to Hannover, the University of Hannover, where they had made a long-term research study about what's the best ingredients in an urban soil, what has the most positive effect on root system developments. And what the conclusion was from the University of Hannover is that the most open material containing of stones, single-sized stones, where you get a lot of porosity, something between 35 to 40% of porosity, that's where the root system can develop really good and fast. So with the ideas from that trip to Hannover, I got back to Stockholm and tried to make a drawing out of that conclusions, so we can use this knowledge in the way we construct soils or planting beds for trees in Stockholm, to save all these trees that were dying. So this is the way the first drawing came up, and you must have this background to understand the whole process that this ended up, why I'm standing here today. So in short terms, it consists of big stones that we excavate the ground to 1 meter deep, and then we put down these big size stones, single size stones. That's important. We call it macadam in Sweden. And the big size was 90 to 150 millimeters. We put the stone down in the ground and compact it really heavily, so we get a strong construction, because it's always heavy loads even on the sidewalks in Stockholm. And if you want to use it in roads, it's also important that you have a good, stable construction. So we put that out in 30 centimeters layer. And when we have compacted it, we start to flush down soil between the stones. And then we make another 30 centimeters layer that we compacted, so the stones rest on the lower stones, so we always get this good construction by compacting the stones. And in the same time, we have this porosity in the material that we could flush down some organic material for the trees to work with. So this is the basic structure. It's what we call structural soil. And on top of that, we have a layer of clean stones, 32 to 63 millimeters, crushed rock, without any soil or organic material at all. It's just the infiltration layer and gas exchange layer, because that is one of the most important things for urban soils. You have to get the gas exchange to work. That's the basic thing. If you don't get the gas exchange to work, you won't get any root system to develop. And at the same time, we had, of course, when I come back from Germany and try to convince the civil engineers of the greatness of this solution, they weren't so easy to convince because they had their ideas about how to construct the road and the sidewalk and everything. So they said I couldn't touch their upper layer of their construction. They wanted to have these concrete slabs, the sand layer, and the asphalt layer, and the roadbed layer of 0 to 63 compacted material. So I had to find a way to round their construction and to get the gas exchange to work. So I implemented a well in this construction so that we could get the gas exchange to work. And the way it works is that when the rain comes and the water goes down to the ground, it pushes out the gases from the ground, and when the water sinks away, it takes down new, fresh oxygen in the ground. So this is the basic thing, and we have tried this and worked with it for 15 years now. So this is the most important thing. We have stopped using soil in Stockholm now. We don't use any soil anymore. We use single-sized stones in different fractions depending on where we are going to use the mixture. If we have open areas where we plant shrubs and perennials and flowers and things, we use the smaller fraction, 2 to 6 millimeters or 4 to 8 millimeters. And we mix it with biochar and we mix it with compost. So this is the basic, and it's nice to see this after we used that construction for 15 years, and my brain started to realize that we can use it even in the smaller fraction. It's the same thing. We started with the 90 to 150 millimeters and to get the good porosity, and it works the same way. As long as you use this single-sized dose material, you have something like 35 to 40% of porosity in the material. So this is a key thing, and it's interesting to compare the thoughts of our planting beds with this material to the looks of how biochar works and how it looks like when you look at it with a microscope. It's the same thing. It's the porosity that's so extremely important in planting beds all the time, so support it with oxygen and everything. So this is what's the hard, that's hard for the brain to take. This is what we call soil in Stockholm now. We don't use any peat anymore. We don't use sand from natural resources. We don't use clay anymore. It's just a local stone material crushed to single sized, mixed with a mix of compost and biochar. So that is the basic mix we're using. I repeat it a lot of times, so you get into your brain. Compost, biochar, and stones. And this is the smallest fraction, 2 to 6 millimeters, where we use it for if we want a grass lawn or we want to plant perennials and bushes. My favorite size is 4 to 8 millimeters. I think that's the best one. But this is, when you make grass areas, it's best to go to this mixture. And it looks like this. And if you have dry stone material and you have dry biochar and dry compost, you won't believe that this is something good for plants. But I promise it is. Don't try to mix more compost or more biochar than 25%, because then you start to get compaction risks. If you keep lower than at most 25% of biochar and compost, you can't compact it. And that's one of the fantastic things about this material. You have this extremely good water holding capacity, extreme good porosity with a lot of oxygen in it, and you can't compact it. So the contractors that don't know how to handle soil can't destroy the soil. That is one of the best benefits of this kind of materials, because the knowledge about soil handling in the cities nowadays, these big entrepreneur contractors, is one of the biggest problem we have in this big development size that we built, and they're traveling around with the big machines on top of the soils and destroy everything if you use old kind of soils. But this kind of soil they can't destroy. So it's much easier for me to go around in Stockholm to see them handling this kind of material. And this is another example of our blendings that we do. This is the 32 to 63 millimeters. It's like fist in size. And we pre-mix it because we have to find a cheaper cheaper way of making this construction in places where we don't have so much heavy loads on top of the hard surfaces. So then we have made this mixture, and it only contains 15% of biochar and compost mix, just to keep it open enough so we can compact it with a compactor and get a good stability in the surface. So this is how it looks. Our latest drawing where we try to explain how we are building this kind of planting beds in Stockholm. And we have a handbook at the City of Stockholm's internet site. So it's just to look for the structured soil in the search. So you can search on it and it will come up for you to look at the handbook. So this is an example for the first time when we changed from soil a couple of years ago, because in the first years we used to flush down soils between these kind of stones. And this is from when we started to flush down biochar and compost instead. I mean, the big thing is in Stockholm about our tree beds and is the infiltration of stormwater. That's the most positive thing for the politician to speak about, or one of the biggest positive things. And it is now accepted that the only solution so far in Stockholm to take care of this 20-year rains that they have to have a solution for, the water department. And now they say this is the best way to handle this kind of event. And as you see, we do try to connect as many as possible of the tree pits, and it's the more tree pits that we connect, the better result we will get, because you get a lot more volumes for the tree root system to work in. And then we use these kind of concrete boxes to keep the surroundings around the trees in place. So you don't, the surface won't be destroyed when if we have to change the tree and before we plant the trees. So this really helps the construction around the trees to keep in place. And they're also closed in the upper part, so we don't get the root system to develop up in the surface. Instead, the root system will go out lower in the construction and never harm the surface of the sidewalks. So this is how it looks when we have done the first layer of stone material, compacted stone, and then we flush down the biochar and compost. And the first time the contractors do this work, they haven't calculated in the right way. They don't understand how long time it would take to flush down the organic material between the stones. But after a couple of days, they know how to do it. It's important that you never put too thick layers in each step of the flushing down of the material. It's only 2 to 3 centimeters of this organic mix on top of it, and then you flush it down and you make it in 3-4 times before it's filled. So in this picture you can see both layers are in place, and you see the well where we collect all the stormwater, and here is the opening in the well that is connected to this aeration layer with clean stones. That's the next step, and here you see the infiltration layer in place, and that's where this opening in the well are releasing the water. And this is a completely open material, so you don't need any pipes from the well to spread the water, because this material is just open, so the water just spreads out. And every tree gets around 25 square meter of this construction. And this is the next important step. It's when our construction is ready. We have made the structural soil, we have made the infiltration layer, and then we seal it with this geotech dye. So the construction of the surface with their small fraction of minerals shouldn't fall into our open material, because this is the lungs for the plant bed, and it's extremely important that it keeps open if the tree should be developing in a good way. And then one of the important things in Stockholm is extremely dry environment in Stockholm. We just get 600 millimeters of water every year in Stockholm, so we try to collect water. In the beginning we just took it from the sidewalks and from the roads, and now we're always taking all the water we can from the roads also. Yeah, and this is an example, one of the latest project we made. And this is the second year. This year we have had two extremely dry seasons. 2017 and 2018 was extremely dry in Stockholm, and still with this construction and how we manage the trees for the first 2 years, we get the extremely good results on the establishment of the trees. Yeah. And this is from a place, Nybrogatan, where we use this other system where we premix the biochar and the stones. It looks rather strange for people that's not used to see this kind of plantation compared to old soils that we're used to. But this has given us the opportunity to choose totally different kind of trees, much more exotic trees that can stand heat much better. And we have pushed the zones of what plants we can plant in Stockholm. So yeah, we're really planting exotic trees in Stockholm now, and they will survive. And it's if you're into the green business, and I've read books about how to get really complicated plants to survive, it's always important to keep them dry in the winter. You must have an open material, and in the same time water holding capacity is important, and this is what we have achieved when we do these mixtures. And this is a common situation out in the suburbs of Stockholm. You have these roads, and on the side you have the sidewalks and bicycle lines, and this extremely boring grass strips. And we thought we'd try to do something with this and construct something else. So we're thinking of infiltration ditches. That this is what we will try to do. So we made this drawing, and it's just a ditch with a lot this crushed stone material and biochar. And in this case it was sloping a bit, so we thought we'd do this embankments to slow down the water that it has to fill up before it goes to the next part of the construction. This is the way it looks. Started with this, excavate to 1 meter deep, fill it with crushed granite and charcoal, and this is the result. So the benefits is, it's so easy to understand. I mean, the material isn't possible to compact, so it's extremely open. The infiltration is more than 100 millimeters an hour, so it works without any help. It can take any water from the sidewalks and from the streets. And of course, the trees establish extremely well in this situation. And we use this system all the time now. This is an alley, really important alley in Stockholm. It's more than 100 years old, 125 years old or something like that. And the trees had started to decline. It was parking lots around the trees, and there was material that was just terrible when you looked down to the ground. And we just started to excavate, take away the old material, and vacuum clean the root system for the trees, and change this to this crushed stone material. And this is just a drawing how it looks like in the construction, where we try to collect as much water from the streets, and then we have this we clean them once every year, the wells. So this is situation after we have remade it. So we collect all the water from the parking lots and collect them down to this structural soil construction. This is how it looks when we have vacuum cleaned the root system, and then we cover it with the smallest fraction of this crushed stone, 25% of biochar and compost. And then we can compact it. In this case, we have these parking lots on top of it, and this is how it looks. And it's quite hard for people that work with green areas to take this when I try to convince them that this is the best way to plant trees. But it works. It works extremely well, and the most important things for the root system is the oxygen. And when we can support this extremely porosity material with biochar, then we get all the benefits from that we have in a good soil. The ability of storing water, to store nutrients, and promote the mycorrhizae and microlife in the ground in this way. And if we do excavation year after we have done something like this, the mycorrhizae is already there in the first season, and that's extremely nice to see that it's really alive, our planting beds now. So this is also this alley that we remade. This is the 32 to 63 millimeter structure, and we seal it with a smaller fraction, 8 to 16 millimeters, just to don't get the finer material to fall down in this bigger material. Because on this one we put grass on top, and then we have these 2 to 6 millimeters, 3 parts on the Biochar and Compost. And then we have seeds on top of it. Looks like this before. They have started growing, and this is the result. And this is quite shocking when you see it the first time. No one could believe that we could crush stone and put some biochar and compost in it and get these results. But as soon as you have seen it, you realize, okay, I understand why. And if you take a spade and try make a hole in the ground, take some of this material and smell it, it smells exactly like you're out in the woods. And that's promising, extremely promising to know that you have the mycorrhizae working and the microlife is on. I see the time is running, so it's just some streets where we made this. This is still before we used the compost mix components. It's just biochar and the stones, and we got this extremely good result from the perennial plantation, and I got a bit annoyed because it grows better here than in my garden at home. I really work with the soil for so many years, and then you do something in a municipality and get this effect. That's nice to see. 2 magnolias and perennials. So this is what a project we did this year, 600 meters of plantation along a sidewalk and a road. Just this mixture of 32 to 63 millimeters with compost and macadam. And in this case, we're going to try to prepare it with mycorrhiza from the start to see what's happening. And we use the fertilizer we use in this case is from compost, the liquid from compost to fertilize it. I don't know what to call it. Fermented compost? Compost. Yeah, compost tea. What?
Compost
tea. Yeah, compost tea. You know what I mean. So this is 600 meters, so we had divided in 3 different sections to treat them differently, see if we can see any difference. So we're going to plant this with trees, and we have sown grass on top of it because we have this finer material on top of it for the grass. So this is how we work now. This is another way, Håkadalsgatan, west of Stockholm. Plant trees in the same material for 1 meter deep and crush stone and compost and collect the water. And this is how it looks this year after these 2 dry seasons that we have had. And this is an example from Helsingborg, south of Sweden. Their main streets, they remake the whole street and use the same mix in Helsingborg. And in Uppsala is all the development areas now, they use this kind of mixture of biochar and compost and stones. And even in Gothenburg, our counteract in Sweden, they have also tried, and that's remarkable. I thought it would never happen. So it must be something really special about this one. And of course, I've taken away the soil in my vegetable garden at my home. So last year I got my first potatoes grown in this mixture, and this year I got my first carrot made in this mixture. Thank you.